Chilling tales for dark nights.
Knuckle Supper. Written by Drew Stepek. Performed here by Jason Hill. Chapter 23. Numbers. As requested for the records, the Tims came for us the next morning. Herman ignored us. I yawned, still waking up. Herman, are you sure you aren't a little curious? He didn't answer. Not Tim clicked his car alarm keychain. White-faced guy. Face the back wall. The three stooges entered my cell and ran me through the same security drill as before. We then headed to the gymnasium. We walked beyond the cots and past the yellow-stained, mildewed incubators to the double doors. Not Tim grabbed a crowbar and peeled back the wooden "Do Not Enter" sign. He pulled the police tape off the door and wrapped it around his forearm. New Tim slapped his cattle prod against a pole. "We wait for Father McAteer," he said. "No need to zap me, ass face," I said, brushing the sparks off my lower back. "Sorry," he apologized. My hand slipped. Disgusted, I bent my head around to look at his much in need of a gym body. "Great. I hope you're not part of the crew we're rolling with to take out Los Angeles' most dangerous gangs." None of them responded. To me, that suggested the Cloth wasn't the deepest posse in town. To this day, I have no idea how they managed to storm the Battlesnake's compound and kill every single thug there. On top of that, they somehow managed to capture a 7-foot-tall Rasta psychopath. Sure, Des and Copperhead loosened the pickle jar for them, but it amazed me that they carried Herman from their doorstep to the jail without being mangled. I tapped my foot impatiently. "Well, it looks like we're going to be working together. I hope you've made peace with your God. If any of us make it back alive, it isn't going to be many." Fat Mac called across the gymnasium as if he were arriving at a party fashionably late. "Sorry for the holdup," he said. "I had some details to sort through." He walked up to us. "Are you ready, Mr. Reynolds?" Still tapping my feet, I answered. "I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be." He pointed to the chipped parquet floor. "Please wait for us here," he instructed the Tims. "If I need you, you'll hear me." Surprised, I asked, "You trust me enough to go in there with me alone?" "Precautions," Max said as he tapped his microphone. "If I feel I'm in danger, I will not hesitate to use this." "And Mr. Reynolds?" "Yeah?" He blew into the mic to make sure it was responding. "This time, I'll not reverse the process." I rubbed at my collar. "I understand." "I will tell you before we enter that it is not very exciting, what we did. Giving you life. That was the exciting part. However, we both know now that we should never have played God." "Don't give yourself so much credit, Fat Mac. Your experiment wasn't as successful as the real human race." "It is, though. Don't you see, Mr. Reynolds? We aided you in your will to live. We helped God bring you into this world." I rolled my eyes. "And now you want to take it away." Mac fogged up his reading glasses with his breath and then wiped them off on his sleeve. "I have to pay the price for participating in following Father Herlihy, as do all the workers at St. Matthew's." As he unlocked the bolted door and pulled back the curtain to my personal Wizard of Oz, I said, "You have not and will never pay as much as your victims have, Mac." "Only the Lord will be the judge," he returned, putting his glasses back on their roost. "I ask forgiveness every minute of every day." "That's quite a few Hail Marys," I said. We entered the top-secret room and Mac flipped on the fluorescent bulbs. It took several moments for them to flicker to life. Some of the bulbs only half illuminated. Others just fused on and off one last time. The lab was less than half the size of the gymnasium. The floor was checker-tiled with a bad grout job. It was so dirty that the white squares were almost as dark as their black counterparts. The first objects that caught my eye were more large incubators, about 20 or so. Worse for the wear than the incubators in the main gym, the oxygen lines were corroded and all the electrical wiring had long since fizzled out. It wasn't quite the majesty you'd expect from a mad scientist's laboratory. Analog life support systems that appeared to be donations from old hospitals remained beside about 30% of the incubators. At the far end, there was a collection of abandoned and decayed wheelchairs, crutches, and IV stands. "You were right," I remarked. Mac looked around the room. "How so?" "This is pretty depressing." A burst pipe under the sterilization sink by the main doors had flooded the right front corner of the room. The black water served as a swimming hole for a variety of insects. The stale aroma smelled like a combination of discounted cleansers, burnt hair, and moldy food. I waved my hand in front of my nose. The shackles around my wrist rattled loudly in the quiet room. "How long has it been since you cleaned this place?" McAteer counted on his fingers. "That has been sealed now for about 12 years. There's no reason to come down here anymore." "All joking aside," I said, "if you knew you were going to shut down your project, why leave all this evidence here to prove you were guilty of something?" He looked back at me confused and somewhat shocked. "What were we guilty of? We were housing and caring for homeless and abused women. The only thing we were actually guilty of was trying to clean up the community." I rubbed my hand across the buildup of filth on a bubble of one of the incubators. "You really believe that, don't you? Look inside this casket. That's where I spent my childhood. I was unaware of the world and I was kept alive by machines, steroids, blood, and drugs. How the hell did you get the drugs anyway?" "Some of our part-time deacons worked as police officers. They were paid to misplace evidence." I looked further around the stain of the bubble inside the incubator to see another synthetic pillow. Unlike the cot in my cell, this bed had sheets and a blanket. However, it wasn't exactly a rich kid's race car bed. Frustrated, I asked, "And you never saw anything morally wrong with misplacing narcotics? The drugs were the fruit that gave life. Otherwise, there would have been nothing. The drugs were the key, Mr. Reynolds. The steroids alone did not bring you back from the afterlife. Every one of the children that began to live and breathe did not become conscious until they were expected the same drug nourishment provided by their mothers in the womb. As you took form, you were bombarded with narcotics, sometimes as a replacement for food. Simply put, your bodies grew inside your mother's infested bodies and developed a need for the drugs like most forming humans need food and water. Our theory from day one was that once your children were born into this world, you lacked that one element to stay alive. As soon as the mother's sour milk was taken away, so was the will to live. Then why the steroids at all? In most cases, he continued, the narcotics weren't enough because many of the births were third trimester miscarriages. The growth hormone was a mistake, which we realized after it was too late. It helped your bodies develop rapidly. It sped up the nurturing process. A rat crawled out from under the pillow inside the broken-down incubator I was surveying. How did you know any of it would work? We didn't, Fat Mac admitted. In our quest to follow our pro-life beliefs, we ran into a lot of trial and error. I scratched on the bubble. The rat investigated my finger by getting on his hind legs and sniffing the inside of the bubble. How much error? I asked. The first subject we gave life to after treatments was your friend, Pico. To our dismay, we didn't give him a large enough dose of the hormone. That is why he is weaker and much frailer than the rest of you. With our second child, we had the opposite reaction. Herman? Yes, your cellmate. Several others around that time were the product of an overdose to the hormones. For several years, we figured we were being guided by the hand of God to create all sizes, shapes, and colors of children. You fell into this stage of the project. We found that the problem with heroin-addicted children was that they took more and more to the drugs, casually ignoring the steroids. Simply put, although the steroids eventually processed and your life system was kickstarted, the need for more and more heroin was imminent. Did you ever figure out a balance, Mac? At one point, we felt we had found the perfect balance with a child whose mother was severely addicted to several narcotics. We monitored him closely, but he seemed to sustain a relatively normal balance between the drugs and growth. His system didn't devour blood at the rapid pace of the others. On top of that, his aversion to sunlight was more limited than most of you. Right up until the day we fought to have the experiment shut down, he was our prototype. Uninterested in my finger, the rat got back down on all fours and crawled under the pillow. I'm sure you know all of our names somehow. I'll guess that prototype was Des. How did you know? Because all the white kids younger than him pretty much look and act exactly like him. I have another question. He swatted a fly off his arm. Okay. I moved toward the rusted door hinges to the records room at the far right end of the laboratory. Fat Mac followed about 10 feet behind me. Even though we were having a peaceful conversation, it made sense that he didn't want to put himself in harm's way. Me being harm. When you used Des as a prototype for the younger subjects, did you use his genetic makeup to help them survive? He hesitated for a second and then confessed. Yes. I guess we did. It became clear that my line of questioning served a purpose because the cloth overlooked a rather large sidebar to their project. Are you sure that he was sterilized as well? You don't think that maybe Des could have evolved the ability to reproduce? Let me take that back. I'm sure you don't believe in evolution. Do you think maybe he figured out a way to reproduce? Fat Mac toweled up some sweat on his neck using the back of his wrist. We would never have made that irresponsible of a mistake. As far as manifesting the ability to reproduce on his own. Like I said, everything about his life was a miracle. But you said he was a prototype. Those were your exact words. Do you think maybe someone else figured they could play God further and let loose a breeding being? The fact is that I've never seen a female one of us. No females in Los Angeles survived the rebirthing process, he said. Right. So, if Des was able to impregnate the girl, and I know from her mouth that he raped her, then he is the one we need to track down. He's the most dangerous one of us out there. McAteer wheezed. I still don't believe you, Mr. Reynolds. I raised my fists in chains. Look, motherfucker! Mac readied his lapel to engage the corkscrew around my neck. I retreated, showing him my palms. Don't do it. I'm calming down. I'm not going to hurt you. He let the microphone fall back into place. Des got the girl pregnant. I'm almost sure of it. All we need to do is find him and the girl, and no one else needs to die. He swiped away at another fly. I will believe you enough to let you find Des and this girl. But the plague we created still needs to be resolved. He approached me carefully. He put his hand across my chest. I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds. This needs to be set right in the eyes of God. Understandably, I lightly brushed off his attempt to comfort me and make me understand his stance and tiptoed deeper into the records room. As I looked around, not knowing where to begin. What number am I, Mac? You're number 14. Ignoring any attempt to console me further, I picked through a stack of folders. Really? I said. I was hoping I was 13. Confused, Mac responded. Why? Because I'm superstitious. If that is true, then that would make you unlucky, would it not? I dumped some folders on the floor outside the door as I grabbed a handful more from the top shelf. You don't even know the half of it. I am the unluckiest person alive. You have an hour, Mr. Reynolds. Although I would like to say I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I don't think there's anything in this room beyond the forgotten ideas, people, and places we misguidedly made. He turned around and exited the laboratory. It didn't take me that long to find my case file. I pulled up a withered wheelchair from the corner outside the records room and read the mini-biography of the first 12 years of my life. My name is Subject 14. I was stillborn on October 21st, 1976 at 5:39 p.m. I was revived, breathing and reborn at 8:12 p.m. I was born with blonde hair and blue eyes at 3 pounds 2 ounces. My birth mother's name was Cheryl Mackenzie. She came to St. Matthew's seeking shelter from her abusive boyfriend. During her second stay at the church, she lost her left arm to gangrene at 21 years of age, which she contracted from the effects of chronic intravenous heroin addiction. No name was listed for my father. Struggling to stay alive during the first 6 months after my rebirth, I was constantly monitored by a young Father McAteer who called for increased levels of heroin and hormone supplements. During the transfer from my original incubator in the shelter to my childhood incubator in the lab, I bit one of the doctors. Although this doctor called for my immediate disposal, the rest of the care staff insisted that I be kept under constant supervision. At 5 years, the doctors attempted to wean me off the heroin mixed into my life support supplements and replace it with dolafine for the first time. My body did not adjust to the new treatment, and I was switched back to heroin. Yearly monitoring of my growth inside and out showed that although the steroids were doing their job, they were overactive and attacking my blood cells. Not unusual, as similar activity was cited in all subjects. A sidebar was clipped onto the 5th page of my file. It read, "Seems to exhibit emotional and hyperactive rapid eye movement. Might be more aware than the rest." As I flipped through the pages, the side notes ended and the reports diminished to weekly, then monthly, and then yearly reports. The chronicles became less about my care and more about my vital signs, growth, and overall stability. The very last page in my childhood manifesto simply read, August 14th, 1988, Subject 14 discharged. May God watch over him. I closed the file, tapped it on my knee, and threw it on the floor. During the trek back to my cell, Fat Mac and the Tims were silent. Even if they had asked me anything, I didn't hear them. I didn't as much feel like a dead man walking as I did a live man walking. Under the circumstances, being alive felt worse. As much as I would spit on the delusional glory of my existence, I always hoped in the back of my mind that it was more than being the product of a drug addict convinced not to have an abortion. So, just like Eldritch, Nomi, and Herman, I was just putting on a vampire variety show. Fat Mac patted me on the shoulder one last time and dropped me off at my cell. I didn't take comfort in the fact that my cell was located adjacent to my childhood home. I lay down on the bed and faced the back wall. It was, after all, the closest thing to a window to the outside world that I'd ever have again. "So, how was it?" "What was it?" Herman asked quietly, sensing my despair. Apparently, he was more curious than he let on earlier. I closed my eyes, fighting the words on the pages of my file. It was nothing. The files were all but destroyed a long time ago. You were number 2, though. I found that out. He popped his nose and mouth into my cell through the bars. "Number 2 what?" "You were the second one of us, Herman." "Bullshit. Who the hell was number 1? I continued my fixation with the back wall. It was Pico. Figures that worthless bag of shit would be number 1. There's nothing to it. We're just as human as everyone else, dude. He stuck his head out of the bars. They're lying to you, Reynolds. It's true. We're a bunch of worthless orphans and druggies. The only reason we have any kind of extraordinary abilities is because of some mysterious steroids and our God-given lust for drugs. It's just like I told you before. Probably because he didn't see his file, Herman remained unrattled. He grabbed the bars with both his hands and inched his face further into my cell. What are you all pussy about, Reynolds? We are extraordinary. We're vampires. I know I'm a goddamn vampire. So we're not the dickheads in the movies and shit. We're strong as hell and we live on blood. That's a vampire. No, we're not. I gave him a go-away gesture with my hand. Fat Mac told me that the reason you're so enormous is because they were still testing out the dosage of steroids when you were born. They gave Pico too little, and they gave you too much. Now, leave me alone. What did they give you then? A headache. The Gospels piped in, signaling midnight. Coming up empty, Herman eventually strolled back to his bed. Although I didn't sleep, I didn't talk for the rest of the night. Good evening. This is Jason Hill, host of the Horror Hill podcast. You've been listening to a chapter from the award-winning novel Knuckle Supper by best-selling author Drew Stepek. Knuckle Supper, Ultimate Gutter Fix Edition, and its critically acclaimed sequel, Knuckleballed, are available now from Bloodbound Books. Check out the links in the video description and sticky comments below to pick up a copy today and show your support for indie horror. Also, please consider making a donation to Children of the Night today and help end teen prostitution and human trafficking. Children of the Night is a privately funded non-profit organization established in 1979 with the specific purpose of providing intervention in the lives of children who are sexually exploited and vulnerable to, or involved in, prostitution and pornography. Visit childrenofthenight.org for more information today. From author Drew Stepek and all of us here at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, thanks for listening and for your support.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.